Now that Hurricane Ian has left Florida and we are starting to understand the extent of the damage left in its wake, one of the next big questions is what gets rebuilt and who pays for it. The catastrophic damage left by Hurricane Ian is projected to be in the tens of billions of dollars. Yesterday, President Biden declared 9 of the county's affected disaster areas, which qualifies them for some federal aid, but not very much and not very quickly. The bulk of this recovery will rely on insurance. Just for the property that was insured, insurers are bracing for a hit of between $28 and $47 billion. But that's just for the insured property. And one of the devastating realities we're now realizing is that so much of where this storm hit was uninsured. In the counties whose residents were told to evacuate, just 18% of homes had coverage through the National Flood Insurance Program. Even in areas designated by FEMA as in the floodplains, less than half of the homes had flood insurance. And the floods from rain and storm surge went well past FEMA's projected floodplains to areas where less than 10% of homes are insured for floods. Those FEMA floodplain projections are supposed to warn people if they are in an area that has a 1% chance of flooding every year. They call them 100-year flood zones, because for every 100 years, you should expect one flood. But as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis pointed out yesterday, this storm hit an area that would be more like a 500-year flood zone. And that's the issue. These 100-year storms, these 500-year storms, they are starting to happen all the time. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, tracks disasters like this, what they call billion-dollar disaster events, and things are not looking good. This chart is adjusted for inflation, and you can see, even with that all through the 80s and 90s, yeah, we did have some big disasters. But the overall cost for rebuilding stayed pretty steady. But now we have catastrophic climate events all the time. Last year, NOAA counted $20 billion weather and climate disasters in the U.S. Those altogether cost $152 billion. In the last 5 years, these disasters have cost the U.S. $788 billion. Now compare that with the amount we're spending on the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest climate bill in U.S. history. That totals $369 billion spread out over 10 years. One of those things is a lot bigger than the other. These 100-year or 500-year disasters have started to become a regular occurrence, and our insurance system is clearly failing to provide support to the people who need it. And even our biggest, best efforts to battle climate change are basically a drop in the bucket compared to the scope of these disasters. So how do we fix this? How do we help people right now and make a system that can last through this new climate crisis? Joining us now is Carolyn Kousky, Associate Vice President for Economics and Policy at the Environmental Defense Fund and author of Understanding Disaster Insurance, Tools for a More Resilient Future, which comes out very presciently next month. Carolyn, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me tonight.
Let me just ask, just to begin with, what kind of assistance should people expect from the federal government if they don't have insurance in a moment like this down in Florida?
Yeah, it's an important question. There will be some assistance forthcoming. As you noted, President Biden has issued a disaster declaration, which unlocks some assistance from FEMA to meet some immediate needs. But unfortunately, those grants are fairly limited. They're capped, and most people can probably expect, several thousand, $5,000, $7,000, but not nearly enough to match the property destruction, the devastation that we've been witnessing. It's important for people to realize that those grants aren't going to make them financially whole after a disaster like this.
Yeah, when you say $5,000 or $7,000 and you juxtapose that figure against those images we just showed everyone, houses just completely leveled. I mean, effectively, just destruction everywhere in some parts of these counties. How can people better know the risk that they're taking on when they go to a place like Lee County? I mean, what kind of information is there for people as they build homes or rent or buy homes in a place that is effectively at the forefront of climate disaster?
Unfortunately, we are not doing the best job in this country with communicating to people about flood risk ahead of time. So you noted those FEMA 100-year flood zones. When someone moves into one of those flood zones and they take out a mortgage, their lender will talk to them about flood risk because they'll be required to purchase flood insurance. But for everyone else, they might not get any information at all. Some states have some basic disclosure when property is sold. But as you were noting, flood risk extends far beyond those FEMA zones. And part of it is because there's more extreme events. Part of it's because sometimes those maps are outdated and need to be refreshed. And part of it is that those maps typically do not include flooding from intense precipitation, which is getting worse in a lot of parts of the country with climate change and is also responsible for a lot of the flooding we're seeing in Florida. As Ian moved inland, it just dropped enormous amounts of rain, which can lead to this really costly flooding far actually from the coast or from a river. And I'll also note that we're not very good about talking about how it's all changing with climate change, as you were talking about.
Yeah, well, it feels like the maps, the information that we have is outdated, right? We're living in a new climate reality, and the tools we use to navigate that seem sorely anachronistic. I guess I wonder if you think that this moment and Hurricane Ian marks an inflection point in terms of how we think of American cities and American development. Because on one hand, part of our nature as Americans is to rebuild and to move forward. And then at the same time, when you look at the growth of places like Lee County and you look at the reality of climate change, it feels like those two things can't coexist. And I wonder if you think there's going to be a hard conversation about whether we can rebuild and whether we should rebuild, given the economic costs and the literal physical danger that people may be putting themselves in.
Absolutely. Those are really difficult conversations and yet absolutely essential to be having right now. We are in a period now of ever increasing risk. This was not the first severe storm to hit our country, and it's not going to be the last. And it is very much time to take a step back and think carefully about how we can build safer, keep people out of harm's way, build more resiliently. So these are things like stronger building codes, maybe moving away from some of the highest risk areas and undertaking community-wide measures, whether that's investments in flood protection or nature-based solutions to help protect us. But we're going to have to start thinking differently about where we build and where we live if we want to not face this sort of ever-increasing cost and the human suffering that comes with it.
Yeah, it's not just an economic question, it's a moral and ethical question. Let me just close by asking you, if someone wanted to take the federal aid and move somewhere else and say, I'm done with this area, I don't want to put myself in the bullseye of another climate disaster, could they do that?
That's a tricky question. And often disasters, we might hope, could be an opportunity to think differently. And if people want to move somewhere safer or build better. But unfortunately, there's a lot of challenges in the system with doing that. Some of the federal assistance dollars are only meant to be used to build back in place in the same way. So there's some policy changes we need there. Sometimes there's simply not enough money to help someone, pay off a mortgage and fully relocate somewhere else. That can be costly. And sometimes the assistance we do have for these types of relocations just takes way too long to get to people. And faced with this kind of devastation, people can't wait around years wondering whether they'll have the financial help they need to move somewhere safer.
There are so few good answers in all of this. And in the meantime, people's lives have been shattered. And that's sort of putting those pieces together as job number one. Carolyn Kousky, Associate Vice President for Economics and Policy at the Environmental Defense Fund. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks so much, Alex.